Hello and welcome to another edition of the RTÉ Rugby podcast. We are heading down towards the BKT United Rugby Championship semi-final, Champions Cup final coming up next week as well. AIL final just last weekend. It's been a busy old time, and I've got Bernard Jackman and Eddie O'Sullivan with me as well. And Eddie, I was just saying to Birch off air just before you arrived on the call as well. I'm glad we're recording this podcast today rather than yesterday. My voice wasn't holding up too well after a busy Sunday at the Aviva Stadium, cheering on Terenure in the AIL final. The celebrations went long into the night down in Lakelands on Sunday evening, and I saw you were on Against the Head on Monday evening talking about it, and it was like, I'll just even speak from my own point of view. Like, I'm a blow into that club, but my God, the celebrations down there on Sunday evening were something else, and off the back of an incredible victory.
Yeah, I mean, it's always great when a club gets their first AIL championship, and it usually takes a good few years to get it done. You know, it's not an easy climb to the top of Division 1A. I just thought again though the quality of the rugby on Sunday was outstanding. You know, and I think the AIL has always been the AIL final. I've done a number of them with RTÉ. They're always been a fantastic day out. Great atmosphere. I'm delighted they put it into the stadium, the Aviva, because even though it's not full, it's still a great crowd. There's a great atmosphere. It's a great day out. But then again, apart from that, the quality of the rugby is superb. You know, I'm thinking back over the years, all the AIL finals that they've had, and I can't think of an AIL final that didn't live up to it. You know, there's always great drama. Now, I suppose in the end, Terenure one pulling up, nobody saw that coming. Certainly, the first 20 minutes, I was worried for Terenure, as I'm sure you were. But once they got those breaks, they really hammered them home. But it's I've been saying this during the year. I mean, I mentioned in a couple of podcasts, the quality of rugby in the AIL, not just 1A, 1B. I'm not saying that because I was involved in it, but I was pleasantly surprised of the caliber of rugby that's played. It's great entertainment, but I think the problem for the AIL is that it's almost it's got its own ecosystem running underneath the professional game, and it gets very little attention in the media because the truth of the matter is that there's so much rugby on now. Professional game sucks all the oxygen out of the room when it comes to talking about rugby. And I think people who are not, engaged below professional rugby wouldn't have any idea what's going on. But it's a tremendous league, great quality to the games, and great entertainment. So it's a pity, I suppose, that we can't give it more coverage. But I suppose the truth of the matter is that the professional game is sucks all the oxygen, as I'd expect. And again, as well, I think the demographic, the huge increase in the number of people watching rugby, are people who won't have attachment to any club. You know, they just follow Leinster or Munster or Connacht or Ulster, and they don't go to club matches again because, again, if you're going to support Leinster, Munster, or Connacht or Ulster, you're going to have one of your weekend days gone, and you're not going to burn a second weekend day on an AL match unless you're connected with a club. So it's just the way it is. But I worried for the AIL for a number of years. I thought it might die on the vine, but I have to say, there's no sign of that happening. But it comes down to a huge amount of work that goes on in the clubs, right through the underage groups, but even up into the executives in the clubs. How much work these people put in to keep the club in a healthy state, and it's all done for nothing. It's all done for free. So it's fantastic. But I suppose all you can do is keep plugging it, and hopefully more people will connect with club rugby. But it's certainly something that I think is in rude health at the moment, which is great.
Yeah, that's the thing, Birch, as well, isn't it? Like Eddie was saying, there were probably a few years where maybe you might have feared that the club scene might have been really kind of dying out in Ireland, but a crowd of 8,000 there on Sunday would lead you to believe it's up on the other way on the curve it's heading.
Yeah, both clubs brought unbelievable colour again. I mean, last year's final, particularly Terenure, because it seems to be newer for them, and obviously they have that connection with the school, so they have a huge amount of youngsters. But as you said, you're a blow in there, Neil. But if you look at that team, there's a lot of mixture of people from different areas. It's not just the team that's old boys from Terenure College, and I think the mix of that is good on the field. It's obviously good off the field in terms of the social side of it. I agree with Eddie. It's difficult. Obviously, some of the games have been streamed now, and I've caught up on a few of them that way. maybe now the time to talk about rugby go, you know, or GA go is dominating the headlines. Let's not start a war. There's too much rugby on TV apparently. No, it is a good product, and fair play to Terenure. They've been on a incredible journey, to use the cliche, but they were down on their heels, you know, whenever 5, 6, 7 years ago, and they made a plan, and it's in rude hell now, and I suppose it shows what can be done. Make it an enjoyable place, and it's not just for that team. And you're down there, you're playing there as well. But I've been over there at a special abilities rugby day. You know, they do mums tag. Like they really are trying to get as many people participating, whether it's playing or a different form of playing or volunteering, and that's Clontarf are. But I think Terenure deserve the plaudits this week, because obviously they've gone and won it for the first time.
Yeah, and it's funny, like we've even just to mention the game itself, Eddie. It's funny, I was in there, and you're talking 34, 35 minutes gone. It was 10-6. It had been 10-3, and like, I'll be totally honest, all the people I was around, there was just this feeling of, geez, this isn't going too well. This could be a long afternoon, because it looked like Clontarf were just kind of walking all over them for a lot of that first half, and all of a sudden we were walking back up the steps at halftime, and every single person I was speaking to, all of a sudden it's 18-10, and everyone's just going, what's after happening here? Like, yeah. What in the name of God's after going on? And it just shows how quickly a game can flip on its head.
Yeah, I thought in the first 20 minutes it looked ominous for Terenure, because Clontarf were really playing really well, taking their chances on the front foot. They were pulling Terenure all over the place, getting half line breaks, quick ruck ball. But I think that intercept kind of rattled Clontarf. You know, it was a gift, kind of a gift out of nothing. Clontarf on the front foot, and suddenly they threw an intercept. And then that kick over the top that bounced up, you know, those two moments kind of probably flipped the switch for Terenure, you know. And they didn't look back, you know, but they're finals, they're once-offs, you know, and you can lose a final on a day out, you know, for no other reason than the bounce of the ball. But I think, to be fair to Terenure, once they got their nose in front, they're really, you know, they really dug in and they pulled away. So there was no complaints. But yeah, I'm sure the first 20 minutes was very uneasy. A lot of uneasy movement in the Terenure ranks in terms of what's going on here. Because I think at that stage, if you after 20 minutes you would have said you couldn't see the way back for Terenure, not because of the scoreboard, because just Clontarf are dominating pretty much every facet of the game. But look, they're finals, that they can flip like that. But it's still a great entertainment. Like, it's great rugby. I mean, the quality of the rugby is very, very good. I mean, I've seen AIL games this year that I would say are better than some URC games. You know, in terms of if you were just a neutral standing there watching it, the entertainment value in terms of the ball being thrown around and what the players are trying to do and the quality of the tries. You get a bad URC game, and it's hard watching sometimes, you know. Whereas I think the AIL has been a breath of fresh air to watch. And as Bernard said, all these games are streamed now. You can get them live on a Saturday afternoon if you're prepared to hit the link and sit down and look at it on your laptop. And I know people outside of Ireland watch those who have affiliations with clubs in Ireland, you know. And I know, even, for example, our hooker this year from Hawaii, Steveni Lombard, when he was playing on a Saturday afternoon with Bucks, his folks were up very early in the morning in Hawaii to watch him playing live, you know. So like it's there's plenty of access to it. It's just, I suppose, making people aware of it, because you're not a rugby head in the sense, you know. It's obviously harder to engage or to find time to do it, but I think we just keep plugging the AIL, because it's really getting going from strength to strength. And
just finally, then, on it, the one person we haven't mentioned so far, Caelan Dooley, 11 kicks out of 12, 30 points, and some of those, like, I mean, he wasn't just tapping over conversions from under the post. Some of those were absolute bombs from out towards the touchline.
Yeah, look, it was phenomenal. And I think, look, he was obviously man of the match, and it was a key difference, to be honest, because once Terenure got a bit of a lead, obviously, Tarf's scrum it was obviously dominant, but wasn't giving them the access points, and their line-out malfunctioned. But so, you know, Terenure implemented a pretty smart kicking game, and then got after Tarf at the breakdown, and he just punished them. And suddenly they went 2 scores ahead, 3 scores ahead, all down to him, without having to do anything really. Sorry, but having to do a huge amount in attack. They obviously defended well, and it was amazing to see. It is the best kicking performance I've seen at club level, I think, ever. And he's still a young player, played with Ben Healy obviously in school. Ben Healy was a goal kicker, you had no chance. If Ben Healy went off, he was going to take on the kicking for Leinster. So no, it's great to see him have his day in the spotlight and performing so well.
Yeah, congrats to them, and fair play to Clontarf as well. It's been a hell of a season from them, and I'm sure those two sides are going to have quite a few more battles over the years ahead. On to the URC. We're into the semi-finals this weekend. The big one on Saturday evening, Leinster against Munster, is 5:30 at the Aviva Stadium, live on RT2 and RT Player, and also commentary on RT Radio 1. Eddie, to start out with, we'll talk about Munster and Leinster as a whole, and then I might break it down into Leinster's win against the Sharks and Munster's win against Glasgow. But with Leinster potentially rotating the squad a little bit more ahead of a Champions Cup final next week, do you see this as a potential opportunity for Munster to strike or catch them off guard? Or do you see Leinster's, is complacency not an issue for this Leinster team?
I don't complacency is ever an issue at Leinster. They've been rotating their squad the whole season without any ill effects. And I know every week we talk about this new look Leinster team. There's another variation on the team. But they're pretty ruthlessly efficient and they get it done. Now, I think Leo has a little more rigor on this week. It's hard to look past the Munster injury list. That was so attritional last weekend. They've lost so many players up in Glasgow. It's a very expensive semi-final or quarter-final for them to get to the semi-final. So I think if Munster were coming full bore on Saturday with everybody on deck, firing on all cylinders, I think Leo would have to recalibrate and say, okay, it's a local derby, it's Munster against Leinster. You take nothing for granted. I think he's a little more wriggle room now with the Munster injury list. But having said that, I still think they've always done this, and probably more so this week, is the spine of the team is going to be very strong. And then the bench is going to be anyone who might have started because, of their experience. If they don't start, they're on the bench. So you've got kind of the bomb squad coming off the bench if things get a bit tricky. So Leinster have got this right so many times throughout the season. I can't see them getting it wrong this week. No, you never know in a game. Look at the game last week for Munster. That red card changed everything for that game, So Leinster go in and they pick up a red card or something. And again, I'm not talking about you pick up a red card for a lazy clean out or a lazy attempt to tackle. You get a red card. So you've got to factor all that in. But I don't think Leo would rotate as much if it wasn't Munster. But it's fact it's Munster. He's got to be a little more careful. And let's be honest, no matter who Munster put into a red jersey next Saturday, they're going to go full bore. They're going to there'll be nothing left after 80 minutes. You can take that to the bank. They'll just go for it, and they'll feel that you get into Leinster here and just rough them up, not in any particular way, except just play as Munster can play when they're up for it. We've seen Munster pull out these big performances, and I don't think last weekend was probably a big performance from Munster in a sense. I think, if you go back last season where they took Toulouse to a penalty shootout in the Heineken Cup, that was those days when people didn't give Munster a chance, and suddenly they come out and they almost upset the apple cart against one of the top teams in Europe. So you've got to put that into your calculations when you're playing Munster. So I think Leo will his hands are tied with injuries, no question about that. He will rotate a bit, but I think he'll be a lot more careful by the fact that it's Munster. And he'll be well advised to do that because Munster, as I say, will come and they'll bring two barrels no matter who's in the red shirt.
And Birch, if we're talking personnel, do you see, for example, could you see anyone who's starting next week in a Champions Cup final starting this week?
No, I don't. I think there's going to be significant change. I think anyone who's in it keeps. I don't see Dan Sheehan playing. I don't see Ross Byrne playing. I don't see GibsonParks starting. I don't see Tyke Furlong starting. So I think it will be significantly weaker. I think this is it's an awful pity from a Munster point of view that they had 4 HIAs and they all failed to get back. Because realistically, this is the perfect week to play Leinster. You know, I think Leinster pretty much will finish top of the URC every year for the foreseeable future. It's just that's the nature of it. So if you're going to beat them, you need to get a little bit of luck, obviously, because you're going to have to go away from home. And in terms of timing, and the week before a Champions Cup final, when Leinster are hell bent on trying to win that, is theoretically an advantage, because they will have to rotate. They will potentially have some of the players will have an eye elsewhere. But the fact it's Munster coming to town, I think focuses the mind. Players who play this weekend will have an eye on, you know, obviously trying to get into this matchday squad for the week after, or the week after that if they get through. And they have been incredibly consistent. And as Eddie said, Leo has managed to selection is an art in itself, and they've got that selection right so often, himself and Lancaster. So I think if Munster could obviously beat them, the way I look at it is for Ulster and Munster, they probably need a trophy to bring it to the next level. And obviously the most obvious one is a URC, but then you got to kind of catch Leinster on the hop, either the week before a Champions Cup final or the week after, which we saw last year and the Bulls did. So it is a massive opportunity for Munster, but obviously badly hampered by the players they're losing. But I think Roundtree will be incredibly happy the way their away form has improved, the grit they're showing, they're showing good game management. And it's a bit of a freebie for them, really, as long as they don't blow up and get smashed. I think that they'll go into this preseason on with a lot happier around where they're going. Obviously, they still need some recruitment, but if they could beat Leinster and obviously get to a final, which would probably be in Cape Town.
Just on the selection there, Bernard, I don't know if you'd agree with this. I think Leinster have to be a little bit careful around their front row selection.
Yeah,
perhaps, you know. I mean, I think Milne was under savage pressure last week.
Yeah.
And I thought they took their time getting the Shepherd's crook out, you know. And the other one I thought is that, like, Healy packing down on the tight head side the experiment didn't work. I mean, there was one scrum where Cian Healy got his pilot's license, you know. So I just think Munster are going to go after him in the scrum. Now, I'm not saying Munster are world beaters in the scrum, but in a game like that, in a pair like the set piece, if it just went wrong for you on the day, you know, like just say Munster got an edge in the scrum and the referee was kind of leaning Munster's way, and suddenly you're picking up 2 or 3 penalties, 4 penalties at the scrum, you know, that can change momentum in a game. We know that, like if your line of misfires, you know, things like that can unravel you no matter how good you are. So I just think it's an area where he'll be very careful. I wouldn't be shocked if he went with and I know he's probably trying to save Furlong, but I wouldn't be totally shocked if he went with Furlong. He probably planned to play him last week and the rest of this week, but with Munster and the way the scrum is, he might go with Furlong, and he might even go with Porter as well, just to make a statement.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I think it's a tricky one. It's an area that obviously Munster will hope to get an advantage. I think he'd probably go Healy and Alatoa. And I think that would make sense then, because both of them would get 50 minutes or 60 minutes and be in a better position than the week after. I think this is the kind of game that Alatoa was signed for, you know, to be able to come in, give them an international player who can do a job like Michael Bent did for a long time, you know, when Furlong's unavailable. But I agree with you. I don't think it's a game to play Milne or, you know, a young tight head. They can't give Munster any soft options into it.
No, they can't. They can't give Munster an entry point to upset things. And one of those entry points in a game rugby is a set piece. Your set piece wobbles at all in a knockout game. Like, that could be the cause of the wheels coming off. Now we're kind of clutching at straws here a bit, you know, because we know Leinster's so strong. But knockout rugby, you know, local derby, Munster, Leinster looking for an edge. Just don't. You might have to make sure when you're going out, what team you pick, they're not getting an easy edge anywhere. And I would think the scrum is one he'd have to think long and hard about. He may not start Furlong, but I wouldn't be shocked if he did. That's what I'm saying, just to batten down that hatch and make sure nothing goes awry there. But look, we'll see. I mean, we're all this speculation, but I still think Munster. I agree with Bernard, especially given Munster's injury profile, they need something to go wrong for Leinster. Like there's something has to misfire for Leinster. And look, that could be a red card or something. You don't know. But like on form and on paper, I think like it's hard to back against Leinster. But having said that, you just those 1 days out, and Munster are king of those 1 days out. Like give them a chance, and they'll take you to the woodshed. So I think it's an intriguing game. And it's I think even if Munster lose, they want to sign off on a big performance. So Munster will be happy if Munster can make it a 1-score game in the last 10 minutes. That's a good day out for Munster in these circumstances. And then you have a chance of sneaking in the last 10 minutes. That's what you do when you're going into a game and you're an underdog, especially in a knockout game. You stay in the game. And if you get into the last 10 minutes in a 1-score game, now's your chance to land a knockout punch. And that's all it is. It's a knockout punch in a winner takes all scenario. That's what Munster will be playing for. And that's all they'll want to do on Saturday.
And then the other part of it, Birch, we mentioned scrum. Going to be very important. Leinster have been a little bit hit and miss there this season. For Munster, though, we also mentioned cards, and a game can swing. For example, if Leinster were to get a card or two, but crucially, Munster will have looked at the game against Toulouse and the game against Sharks over the last 2 weeks, and seen Leinster score 28 points against Toulouse during yellow card periods, and score 21 points against the Sharks last week in yellow card periods. I'm being completely obvious in stating here, like that, if you're going to play against Leinster, keeping 15 players on the pitch is going to be pretty vital to that.
Yeah, it is. It's absolutely key, and it's perfectly set up for Roundtree to be able to give that message, with real clarity and show the examples of how Leinster have taken games away from people in that 10-minute period. It's been incredibly impressive how they've been able to up the ante and exploit that space that an extra man gives you, because a lot of other teams don't, certainly not in the same manner. So it's going to be a tough one for Frank Murphy. Yeah, both teams, in fairness to them, very rarely get caught out with head-high shots. Both teams' tackle tech is good, but the way both teams attack the breakdown, you just need to be a little bit off, and there can be head-high contact in those cleans, and that could give either team an entry point. But obviously, as we've seen, any yellow card would be, you'd imagine, lethal for Munster. But they can't back off Leinster as well. They got to play on the edge. They got to take Leinster out of the rhythm. And if you look at, the Glasgow, the red card definitely helped Glasgow. But you look at the Sharks game, the Stormers game, it was kind of Munster of old, where they just upset the opposition, get them distracted a little bit, take them out of sync, and that's something that obviously will have to happen this weekend.
The interesting thing for me about next weekend is what Munster, like last week, Munster threw a curveball at Glasgow. When we covered on against the head on Monday night, they played a blitz defence. If you remember down in Limerick, the game that Glasgow won comfortably, Munster played a drift defence, which they've been doing pretty much all season. They come up and then they make a read and they push with the ball. So it's a softer defence, but it's very effective. Most teams use it anyway. I mean, the only teams that use the blitz more than anybody else are the South African teams. And the blitz is a high risk strategy, because if it works, it's brilliant. If it fails, it's catastrophic. If you break a blitz, it's a try, end of. And we saw that near the end of the game, where Ross Byrne came flying out of the line to make a tackle in Glasgow, and he didn't stop the football, and Glasgow scored the only try of the game, their only try of the game. So, question is, will Munster bring the blitz next Saturday against Leinster? The danger with that, in my book, is that Leinster will not be spooked like Glasgow were by a blitz defence. If they go out expecting a drift and Munster blitz them, the first 10 or 15 minutes they might wobble a bit trying to get to terms with it, but eventually they'll find a solution. And they've picked South African teams apart all year against the blitz, so they know exactly what to do against the blitz. So will Munster stick with the blitz and try and upset them, which is very effective? If it works, it's brilliant, because it actually psychologically spooks the attack. Or will they go back to the drift defence, knowing that Leinster can score against the drift as well? So that's the first thing I'd be looking at. And as regards the yellow card, I actually think Leinster have a yellow card game plan if you watch them. most teams have a simple one where you get a penalty and a yellow card, you stick it in the corner, and it's 50 against 14, 5 meters out, and you go and maul them. If the maul doesn't score, you collapse enough the defence to open up the outside channels, and you either go through them or around them out there. But if you watch Leinster when they numbers down, they relentlessly attack the short side, and you have to resource the short side. So you're down a player and you resource the short side. If you over-resource the short side to plug it up, you're suddenly then going to be caught in the middle of the field and either go through you or around you. So I watched them use that short side really effectively where they flood it. And if you number off, you sometimes number off too much, get caught a couple of times, they get you. Thought through, very well thought through, and they know what they're trying to do all the time to you. Now, whether they get it done or not, it's another thing. But you can be sure they know what they're trying to do. It's not making it up as they go along. It's not like, let's see what happens next. It's well structured, and they're ruthlessly efficient then when they get chances. So I think Munster next weekend, will they blitz? Will they go back to drift? Very interesting to see what happens there. And as I think I agree with Birch that they just can't. Munster have to keep 15 players on the field, or that could, like, one yellow card could kill Munster on Saturday.
In a final word, who are you calling, Leinster or Munster?
Well, for me, I have to call Leinster. Like, I much say, I'd like to say Munster can really get this done. You know, I'm not saying it can't, but on all the evidence in front of us is that Leinster would have to kind of mess up for Munster to beat them. That's the sad truth. But that's who Leinster are. You know, they're arguably the best team in Europe at the moment. And Munster have one hand tied behind their back with injuries. But, you know, of all the teams, Munster are capable of those one moment knockout punches. But it's going to take a hell of a punch on Saturday to knock Leinster out.
Birch, do you see a shock on Saturday?
Yeah. No, I would have fancied Munster a lot more if they had those injuries. So I agree with Eddie. I think Leinster should be good enough. No one's been able to really, finish them off this year, and I think this group is playing with a lot of confidence. So yeah, I'll go Leinster.
All right, so that is 5:30 Saturday evening. The other big game to talk about is probably Connacht and Ulster, and breaking off then into Connacht and Stormers this Saturday afternoon. But Eddie, Connacht 15-10 winners against Ulster in the quarterfinal last Friday evening. A surprise more so than a shock result, I would say, but a game that was ultimately won and lost at the breakdown.
Oh yeah, I mean, it was an intriguing game to watch, actually, because the ebb and flow of it was all in Connacht's favour. You know, I mean, I was convinced near the end that Connacht were going to lose it. And based on the reason I thought they were going to lose it is because usually in a rugby game, if you get opportunities to win a game and you don't take them, it inevitably comes back and bites you on the backside, you know. And Connacht could have won that game by another 15, 20 points, and that's not being unrealistic, because if you look at the first half, Connacht basically had three try scoring opportunities. There was the obvious major line break, which was like all Farrell had to do was basically pass the ball to Caelan Blade, and he was under the sticks for 7 points. And for some unknown reason, a penalty 5 meters out, opted to tap it, which is fine. A lot of teams are doing that now. They knocked the ball on, and then they had one other really golden opportunity. They had a 5 meter scrum. They ran a starter play, and in fairness, Connacht are usually very good in their starter players. They threw the ball on the ground, and Ulster almost broke out and nearly scored off it. So you had those three gilt-edge opportunities where a try would have really made a massive statement. They took none of them. Then the second half, they dominated the third quarter almost. I don't think Ulster got an access to the Connacht 22 in that whole third quarter. Now, to be fair to Ulster, that third quarter, they defended really, really well. Connacht couldn't break them down. But you felt really, other than I think it was a scrum penalty that Connacht got, they didn't have any dividend. So then, in the 63rd minute, after all that pressure from Connacht, Ulster scored a try and converted. And it's a 2-point game. You're thinking, oh, there's no way Ulster aren't going to kick on here. And I remember talking to Darren Cave on Monday, round against the head. He said that when Ulster scored that try and converted it, and then they got a really lucky call. Remember They almost scored in the corner. Vermeulen was tackling into touch, but the ball came off a Connacht hand.
Yeah, it came off Matt Hansen.
Connacht get the line out. It's also an Ulster line. You're going, oh my God, that's it. And Ulster couldn't get it done. So, like, they're the ebbs and flow of the game, the swings and roundabouts of it. But you have to think that Connacht were really flying awful close or sailing awful close to the wind. But the crucial thing that killed Ulster, the reason they couldn't take advantage was their turnover at the ruck was shocking. I think they had 11 turnovers at the ruck. Literally got turned over. Either lost the ball or got penalised. And I knew after 20 minutes it was going to be one of those nights where you're going to struggle at the ruck. And I thought, like, the first thing you do as a coach is you get the messages in to tighten up your clean-outs, tighten up your support lines, tighten up everything around the ruck. Because they were using the same system as everybody else, like a ball carrier plus 2 clean-outs. But that wasn't working. For some reason, Ulster still weren't accurate. And at halftime, you would have had to pivot away and go, okay, we're going to put 3 support players in the ruck, 1 ball carrier and 3 clean-outs. And that should have secured the ball. Now, the trade-off there is you've 1 less attacker on his feet. And maybe you have to run 2 pods of 4 instead of 2 pods of 3. You lose 2 attackers. But the point is, in an emergency situation like that, where you have a really big problem with a huge part of your game, you make the trade-off and you put an extra, support player into the ruck and make sure you keep the ball. But like Ulster didn't adapt. They just stayed with that 1-3-3 shape. 2 with the ball carrier, 3 in a ruck, and Connacht just kept turning them over. And in fact, looking at my notes on the game for Against the Head, there was, even in the last 10 minutes when the game was like Ulster still could have won the game, they got turned over 3 times at 3 different rucks. Massive turnovers. And the irony of it was the final turnover, the end of the game, or the final, mistake was a turnover at a ruck in front of the Connacht posts. And I'm thinking, that was fixable. Like, that could have been fixed. It wasn't the perfect fix if you put extra support into a ruck. Because you have less attackers, but I'd rather have the ball with less attackers than lose it with more attackers. And I just thought Ulster didn't put a fix in. It was a coachable fix. It wasn't a perfect fix. It was just a short-term thing. But in a knockout game, if that part of your game is coming asunder, you have to fix it. And they didn't fix it, and it basically cost Ulster the game. Their attack came to nothing. They had 1 major line break off Balakoon. I think it was Mac Hansen made a great cover tackle, and then they turned it over 2 rucks later at a ruck. So, like, I don't want to take any credit from Connacht. I thought it was a super performance. They obviously targeted the ruck, caused mayhem for Ulster, shut down their attack. But you have to think Ulster have to take a lot of the blame themselves for so credit to Connacht, but also it's pretty forlorn times up in Ulster after that, I have to say.
Birch, from a Connacht point of view, though, I mean, the accuracy that goes into that coaching detail, and for the players as well to execute it out on the pitch, just around that ruck area, where even in the first half, like Seamus Hurley-Langton, I think, picked off 3 turnovers himself, a couple of penalties and one clean turnover. Dylan Tierney Martin making that one at the end. Conor Oliver and chipped in with another couple. Cian Prendergast had one as well. Like, I mean, it wasn't just 1 or 2 players, it was right across that entire pack. And I think Mac Hansen came up with another. It was players across the entire pitch who were just so accurate in the way they went about things at the ruck.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, you have to they had to do that. They'll have to do it again. Stormers this weekend. Munster have to take Leinster out of their sink at the breakdown. But we haven't seen Ulster being, I suppose, targeted and smashed in that area. I haven't seen them all season. Other areas of their game have been, good and bad over the course of the year.
Sorry to interrupt. Up until last week, would you have considered Ulster to be a pretty solid team around that area?
Safe. They're safe, and I would be more critical of their lack of ability to bring their strike runners into the game. But I actually didn't really have a big concern about their breakdown, and it's the most comprehensive, I suppose, tooling that I've seen them get this year. And obviously, to happen in a quarter final at home is devastating for the fans and for the players and the management. But I thought Connacht were excellent, and it was multiple threats. You go into a lot of games and the opposition have 2 jackal threats. Ty Byrne, for example, in Munster, or Clontarf when he played, and everybody all week is talking about dealing with him, getting there before he arrives. Whereas the variety of what Connacht threw at them at the breakdown was really impressive. The skill set of the players, the bravery to get in and get that ball before the opposition first arrival, and it was brilliant. And also, they stopped them all. I know they conceded one try, but they dealt with that Ulster maul in a way that a lot of the other teams haven't done. And to be fair to Ulster, it's probably got him out of jail a few times this year. That was there, but Connacht did really well. I think Connacht was obviously, except the fact that they blew a couple of tries. Which you would bank on them to score. So look, at Ulster looked pretty lacking confidence, lacking intensity. It's going to be a long summer for them. But Connacht, it's a great way for Andy Friend to go out and like the reality is, well, like they were so excited to get the trip to Cape Town. In terms of the way they talked about it, they see this as a brilliant opportunity. Had it been all about, with travel down there with backs against the wall, etc., etc. So they'll go down there with nothing to lose. And the Stormers, well, obviously you would fancy them. They've shown a little bit of weakness this year. Munster obviously beat them. They were a very poor way to Exeter. And also they're quite I suppose they're very ambitious teams, and they go through games in phases. So when they're hot, they're really hot, but they can also make a lot of errors. So Connacht will be looking to capitalise on that, and likes of Hansen and Bundy showing a bit of form as well. Connacht will need their big game players to come to the fore.
Yeah, and that's one thing with the Stormers, Eddie, that Birch pointed out there, that they're as dangerous as they are, and they've been dangerous against the best teams in this league. But there are points in almost every game where they give teams opportunities. We saw it, in the game against Leinster at the RDS, where they were in equal parts brilliant and terrible throughout the game. We saw it against Munster, where Munster had those purple patches and had those opportunities, and we saw it in the quarterfinal for the Stormers against the Bulls, where it looked like they had the thing sewn up, and in the end they clung on for a 2-point win. So even if Connacht know that it's going to be incredibly difficult down there, there has to be a thought in their mind that at certain points in this game they are going to get opportunities, and it's just about whether or not they can take those chances.
Yeah, I mean, that's probably if there's something that's going to worry Connacht going down to play the Stormers, is that they're underdogs away from home. So in those scenarios, you've got to take your chances. Now, they're underdogs away from home last week, and they didn't take all their chances, and they still got out of jail. So I think that would worry them, as if they will get chances against the Stormers. There's no question about it. But can they nail them? And for that reason, plus the fact I don't think there's any pressure on Connacht. Connacht go down there, just give it a go. It's knockout rugby. It's win or go home. And if they happen to pull this off, it'll be another season for Connacht, like it was back in, I think, 2016 when they won the Pro 14. So they're in bonus territory, with all due respect to them, in the sense that nobody had Connacht down for a final of the URC, even a few weeks ago when we got to the knockout stages. So if they were to make the final now, it would be an incredible story. And it's still, I agree with Bernard, it's possible they could pull it off if they can capitalise on the Stormers when they give them those windows of opportunity, and they will get them. But that's the one thing that worried me last week. They had windows of opportunity in Belfast to really punish Ulster. They didn't. And had Ulster managed to score at the very end last Friday night and knock Connacht out, it would have been a smash and grab for Ulster, not for Connacht. We'd thought up there, if Connacht win and Ulster, it's a smash and grab. It's the other way around. And it would have been rough justice had Connacht lost. But they should never have been in that position. And the thing worrying me is next weekend is that they must take their chances when they get them. And they will get them. They need to take them. Otherwise, it's not going to happen for them. But still, it's another interesting game in the sense that you want Connacht to put it off. You think they can do it, but in your heart is saying it shouldn't happen. But that's the beauty of the game, I agree with Bernard. They will get chances now. Hopefully they'll take them, and that could be it, for Connacht. It would be an incredible journey if they make the URC final. Coming from a team that were just kind of supposed to be making up the numbers in the knockout stages, and they were down. They had to fight so hard this year to even get to the knockout stages. We weren't even sure if they'd be in Europe next year. So everything is kind of coming. They made the knockouts. They're into Europe next year. So this will be the final. This will be the cherry on the cake to make the URC final.
the frustration I would have, Birch, if I was a Connacht fan, is that, you know, it's this point now, this final third of this season is where we've seen this coaching team that's been assembled over the last few years finally actually kind of click together. And it's just about to break up again in a few more weeks. Randy Friend is moving on. Deval Senecal is heading to Iona. Mossy Lawler is heading back to Munster. And I don't know, I just have this kind of feeling in the back of my mind that all of a sudden you're starting again a little bit from scratch in August and September.
Yeah, look, it's unfortunate because I think they have really kind of shown a culmination of all the hard work that those coaches have put in. Friendy, I think, has done a very good job. I think it's brilliant that he's brought them back to the Champions Cup, and obviously he's hoping it doesn't end this Saturday. They've blooded a lot of good young homegrown players, and I know Eddie sees them on a regular basis, and there's more to come through that system. But at least Wilkins is staying on, so there's that continuity. Colin Tucker staying on. Obviously it's exciting. Muldoon coming back. Scott Fardy, has the potential to be an excellent defence coach. I understand they're in the market for a backs coach that is yet to be announced. And I think they just missed out on a pretty high profile former international coach there. So that would be another boost, to add a backs coach to that coaching team. Obviously, they've got to gel and they've got to find a way to work together. But I do think Senegal and Mossy Lawler and Friend, will leave with their job bringing Connacht to where they're at now.
It would be some just to finish up, Eddie. It would be some achievement if they were to cap this off and get the whole way to a URC final.
Yeah, I was just saying that it would be to be fair, Connacht's seasons rarely go on straight lines. There's ups and downs, And I think the great thing from this year was that the tail end of the season, they really had an uphill battle, in the URC. And effectively, I think they've won, basically they won 6 of their last 7 games, to get into the playoffs. And even then they weren't sure of Europe. And, so, I'm delighted for them because the start of the season was very tough for them because of the whole mistiming of the laying of the pitch and the sports ground. And all their preseason or all their early season games were really tough local derbies and stuff. So they had a really tough start to the season. And, it's one thing, trying to find your form, but everybody wants to start the season well, because once you start the season badly, you're pushing a rock up a hill for the rest of the year. And credit where credit is due, they got it done. And so now, this is bonus territory, to be fair. I don't think it's saying that negative about Connacht. I think if you told them, just the last week before they were getting into the knockout stages, that they'd actually be in a semi-final, down in South Africa, they would have bitten your hand off for that. So, and deservedly so. They've fought their way to this point. So if they could cap it off now with a final, the URC final, that'd be amazing. And I agree with Bernard that they are retaining some of their staff, but I do think there is always a bit of disruption when people leave like that because the new guys coming in have to get up to speed. Now that's not an excuse for a bad season, but just remember every coach brings their way of doing things, their philosophy, and that has to get bedded in. So not saying it can't be done or it won't be done either for that matter, but I think it just makes it a little more difficult. And there is a little bit of a reboot going on, even, with 2 or 3 new faces, there's a reboot has to happen in terms of what they're doing and where they're going. But look, that's the problem for next season. This year, they kind of just keep their foot on the pedal here and see what happens. It's 80 minutes of knockout rugby. Anything's possible.
Certainly is anything possible. And who knows, we might have an all-Irish URC final between either Leinster or Munster and Connacht. Fingers crossed for that one. But so that's Stormers against Connacht, 3:00 on Saturday afternoon, followed by Leinster and Munster at the Aviva. That's 5:30, and that's live on RT2 and RT Player. Eddie and Birch, thanks a million for joining us. We have more coming up on today's RTÉ Rugby podcast, I should say. We're going to take a quick little break now, and afterwards I'll be speaking to Jamison Gibson-Park. So stay tuned for that. Fellas, thank you. Now, you're very welcome back to the RTÉ Rugby podcast. I'm delighted to be joined now by Jamison Gibson-Park, who's on board in collaboration with Heineken's Love Rugby campaign, which is encouraging sports fans to enjoy a bit of friendly rivalry this spring as Dublin gets set to host the Heineken Champions Cup final in the Aviva Stadium on Saturday of next week, May 20th. Jamison, thanks a million for joining us on the pod. I hope you're well.
No trouble at all, man. Thanks for having me.
I understand you've been a busy man lately, not just on the pitch but off it as well. You've had a new arrival in the house as well.
Yeah, man. I've got a 3-week-old, so you can imagine it's pretty busy. I've already got 2 little girls as well, so three's a crowd, as they say. It's keeping us busy, but yeah, it's been awesome. Wouldn't have it any other way.
Yeah, and I often hear a lot of athletes talk about, having young kids in the house and how it might take your mind off playing Munster at the weekend or taking on La Rochelle in a Champions Cup final when you walk in the door and there's a couple of kids who ultimately don't really care who La Rochelle are. They just want to have a few minutes with daddy.
Exactly, yeah. It's tough to think about anything else. Like you say, when you walk in the door and there's 2 kids, 2 busy kids, and then a newborn. So at times it's definitely tough to think about anything else. But like I say, it's awesome, and sometimes a good chance to take your mind away from footy, as you say.
And it brings everything into perspective as well. I'm always when I'm at Ireland games and at the big Leinster or even Munster matches as well, or all the provinces after those big days, and you do see the kids down on the pitch after the match. I remember Johnny Sexton even a few months ago talking about how special those days are when he's bringing his kids out after those matches. And I do remember being down pitch side after you won the Grand Slam with Ireland, and so many of you had your families out there. I mean, those look like being the real special moments and being the great days of, when you're really lucky to be out there and being able to share those moments.
Oh, undoubtedly, man. It's awesome. I think it's one of my favorite things of I suppose one of my favorite things we get to do really is, it's Faz has kind of brought that real emphasis on family into Ireland, and like you say, those moments after the games and even the days following, it's pretty wicked, and it's a big part of why I do what I do. So yeah, it's absolutely brilliant, and the kids love it, and my oldest is probably old enough now to kind of understand what's going on, and she has mates at school that might see her on TV or whatever, and so stuff like that is pretty awesome, and yeah, certainly moments to savor.
I can imagine so, and hopefully you get a couple of those moments before the end of the season as well. But
hopefully, bro.
Yeah, I mentioned rivalries at the start of this, and an old rivalry coming up this weekend, a newer rivalry ahead of next week. It's a pretty busy time all around this end of the season.
Yeah, man, it's flat out. It's been like a pretty crazy run in when you look back at it. We obviously had Ulster round of 16, Leicester, Toulouse, and they were straight into Sharks, Munster. So it's kind of like it's just one after the other. So, but like you say, an old rivalry. It's a game that we certainly all look forward to. It's a massive one, and it's one that both teams really get up for. So, we certainly look forward to that on Saturday, and then, like you touched on, a newer rivalry in the following week. So, obviously, La Rochelle have got the better of us the last couple of times out. So, again, that should be another cracking fixture.
Being able to do all of these at the Aviva Stadium must be massive as well. Not just the fact of being able to play in front of a home crowd, but like there are so many extra little benefits that go with being able to have that familiarity, that everything is normal. It's the same training week. You're not dealing with airports, travel, sleeping in your own bed, those kind of things, staying on the same training schedules. There must be a really good level of comfort and familiarity with the whole thing.
Yeah, 100%. Like it was something, when it was announced that the final would be in the Aviva, it was a pretty big carrot for us, obviously. So we obviously went hard at it, and we've done pretty well, I suppose, to get ourselves to this stage now. But yeah, like you said, it's been a number of games now on the bounce in the Aviva, and yeah, it's awesome, really, that we've got the chance to do that. And yeah, I suppose just like you say, the sense of familiarity about the place, and not to say that you get into like a rhythm, but yeah, it certainly feels pretty good to know that you're going to be playing in the Aviva each week.
There's been a funny sense. I'll skip ahead, sorry, to the Champions Cup final, but there's been a funny sense of fate all season with the way things have gone, where it seems like Leinster and La Rochelle have almost been on this collision course. And it's funny the way the knockouts even went, where it was one of the provinces in the last 16. It was Leicester Tigers in the quarterfinal, Toulouse in the semi. I mean, almost the exact same route. Just swap Connacht in for Connacht in for Ulster in comparison to last year. How much has it been on your minds about maybe not getting a rematch against La Rochelle, but at the very least getting back there to be able to prove a point in the final after what happened last year?
Yeah, massive, eh? Like, obviously they got the better of us pretty well last year in the final, and those moments are tough to forget. Certainly the ones at the final whistle, and even in the changing room after, and the days preceding is pretty tough, and ones you kind of look back on and you probably remember those more fondly than the wins. They really stick with you. So that was obviously a big driver for us, to try and get back there again, and we've done that now. But the final is the biggest one, it's the hardest one to win. So it's going to be a massive couple of weeks, obviously. Munster firstly, and then into La Rochelle. So they certainly don't get any easier, but yeah, we're pretty keen to get stuck into it, I suppose.
And obviously you're contending across multiple competitions again this year, and it was something that Leo Cullen spoke about last week, where a lot of Leinster people, a lot of people will talk just mainly about the Champions Cup, but it's clear 2 trophies is what you want this year. Like, you joined 2016. Last year would have been your first trophyless season since your first season. You would have picked up one pretty much every year across those 4 or 5 campaigns. Like, it must have felt a little bit weird and incredibly deflating finishing up the season and not having anything to show for it.
Yeah, oh, you're bang on, man. That Bulls defeat as well was one that stuck. Obviously, it was at home in the RDS and in front of our home fans and friends and family, and we didn't show up that day. And like I say, those ones probably stick with you more than some of the wins. So that one again, and obviously the involvement now of the South African teams has made the URC, I think, so much more difficult to win. So we'll see how Connacht get on down there at the weekend. But yeah, we've obviously got Munster to get past first to get into the final. So that's no easy feat. But yeah, certainly I think the involvement of the South African teams has made it a better competition overall for sure. And they got one up. The Bulls got one up on us in the RDS. So it's not often we lose there. And yeah, that's certainly those kind of ones that stick with you.
There's a lot of change coming in Leinster over the summer. Stuart Lancaster leaving, Johnny's going to be retiring. You'll have Jack Nienaber coming in. How important is it for you? Has it been spoken about as a group as well about wanting to send people off on a high? And like, I know there's obviously the core, the team is staying the same, and Leo Cullen's still there, but there's a lot of change, and it does feel like a bit of a new era starting next year.
Yeah, for sure, man. It's probably not something we've touched on massively, but I think maybe that's probably a little to do with Johnny, the way it kind of finished up and his injury and whatever. We're obviously gutted to be missing him, and a few other lads probably finishing up as well, and then Stu moving on. So yeah, like you say, it probably is kind of feels like Stu's been there 7 years now, and it's kind of coming to an end. But I think those guys for sure, like Johnny and Stu, they certainly deserve to go out and on winning terms. So it'll be a driving factor for us for sure. But there's a lot of other things you have to get right to get the victory. So I think we'll be fully focused on that first, and maybe enjoy the celebrations later if we can get the job done.
You've obviously got to know Johnny very well on the pitch, playing inside him all this time. How have you? How has that partnership gone? Like, did it take a while for you to gel with him, trying to figure out what his movements are, for him to figure out what your movements are, and just kind of get on the same wavelength, or did you feel it was something that came quite naturally?
Yeah, it took years really, I think. But that was probably more to do with like my position in the team. Lukey was number one for a long time, and I was kind of playing second fiddle to him, so probably didn't play a lot of rugby with Johnny until probably the last 3 years really. So but yeah, once I played a bit with him, and you know, you get a bit of training cohesion and all that kind of stuff, and obviously get to know him so much through, you know, what he delivers in meetings and all that kind of stuff. So but yeah, man, it's been an awesome journey to kind of play alongside him for these last number of years, and looking forward to hopefully a few more.
And how has he been as a captain at the moment? Like, how involved is he being on a week to week level? Is he kind of fulfilling the captain's role almost, but maybe a little bit closer to game day, taking a step back?
Yeah, I think he's pretty conscious of that, that the other guys like Gary, Cheese, James Ryan, and Lukey, you know, I think he's, you know, they're pretty great leaders in their own right. So he's happy to take a step back, and not only them, but obviously the rest of the leadership group as well. So I think he's pretty good with that stuff. You know, like if they need anything, or any of us for that matter need anything, with you know, he's only a phone call away. So but yeah, he's getting stuck into his rehab. I know he's doing a lot of work with Einar Anderson, the new the rehab guy in HPC. So he's earned a good bit around, floating around Leinster. But yeah, like I say, I think he's pretty keen to just take a step back and let the other boys get into it.
And then the other out half who's stepped in and has been doing a fantastic job this season, Ross Byrne. Like, he started every one of those Champions Cup campaigns, and it feels like he's very much kind of made this his campaign. What have you seen the growth in him in the last few years? Obviously, he's got his run back in with Ireland. He's, you know, his international career is back on track. From what you were seeing, like, has he improved considerably this year, or has he just kind of had a better rub of the green, a better bit of luck to get back into the international mix?
Yeah, I think it's always been the same for me with Rossi. Obviously, like, we played a lot together in my first few years, and he's come on massively as a leader since then. But probably like in the last 3-4 years, he's been a massive leader in the team, and he really runs the show week to week, like in the games that he's involved in. So he's pretty much like, you know, he's like Johnny. He's near on another coach with the way that he prepares the plays, and the way he connects with all the other coaches. So that for me hasn't really changed massively over the last 4 years, probably for Ross. But he, like you say, he's got more of probably an opportunity in the bigger games. And but yeah, like I touched on, he's pretty incredible, really. The way Harry's much the same, actually. They're pretty good at you know, they watch like a load of rugby, they know the rugby very well, and they understand what we're coming up against most of the time, and they connect brilliantly well with Andrew Goodman, our new backs coach, like they did with Felipe as well. So yeah, he's got a pretty awesome game understanding, and I think a lot of that is probably down to working with Johnny over the years as well.
Yeah, it's funny. I a lot of the time I see people talking about him, and there seems to be a perception maybe that he might be quiet, he might be shy, but I've always got the impression maybe that's because people look at Johnny Sexton and him being such a vocal figure. I've never really got the impression that Ross Byrne was a shrinking violet or anything like that.
No, he's far from it, man.
Finally, then, before we finish up on your own game, it's been a kind of a strange season for you, where you've had a handful of small little niggly injuries, but I suppose that the flip side and the positive side is that you've kind of hit the ground running every time you've come back. It hasn't really taken you a handful of games to get your game speed back up. Like, you must be pretty pleased with where your game is at the moment.
Yeah, for sure. Like you touched on, it was pretty frustrating start to the year, especially with the injury and missing the first few games. But obviously, I was able to get back for the autumns, and yeah, I suppose testament really to the rehab teams in both Leinster and Ireland. Done a great job with getting me back both times. So yeah, but I'm relatively happy with how things are going, and hopefully can crack on in the next few weeks.
Yeah, so hopefully three game weeks over the next 3 weeks, hopefully 3 victories, a couple of trophies, a few weeks off, and then into the big stuff of World Cup preparation, hopefully. Is that how the timeline is hopefully going for you?
That's ideal, man. There's obviously a lot of hard work to do, but yeah, looking forward to it for sure.
it's a very simple game when you just lay it out like that. 3 wins, a couple of victories, 2 trophies, and finish up on that. Jamison, thanks a million for talking to us, and very best of luck this weekend against Munster and next week in the Champions Cup final as well.
Pleasure, Neil. Thanks for having me, man.